The Adventures of Modemboy, The First to Connect, by Mayumi Takadanobaba, August 31st, 2018. Japan, 1989. The first screech of the modem was heard and transformed Mayumi into Modemboy. The octopus connections opened the world to word combat. Watch, listen, and learn as Modemboy builds this first commercial bulletin board service in the closet of a studio apartment in Roppongi, Tokyo. Modemboy transcends, smashes records, and dedication. Long ago can only be said in Japan by grabbing your chin and stretching it out as long as your arm. This book is dedicated to Finkelbert Thumperdinck as a dear friend who witnessed the birth of Modemboy and was his hijinks partner. Still in my wallet and still in his. It's a bet neither of us has lost, as the dinner that made John Belushi in The Cheeseburger famous is steep. I married the girl sitting next to me on the Korean Airlines flight from LAX to Tokyo. She still sits next to me 29 years later. Our two kids are grown and are spectacular humans. Landing in Japan at 23, $2,000 and a month to travel, my host family was found from my work with the blind. It's a connection and a welcoming that made Japan my second home and approachable. Matane can only be said in Japan with your right hand visibly dangling below your balls. It also means see you later. Certain cultural rules are only found in gutters and dives at 3 a.m. In our case, though, it was 8 p.m. at Gas Panic, the original, in Roppongi. The steel bar and benches were alit with breasts bouncing and 3 blokes at the bar. Finkelbert was one of them, with Darwin Best and Barton Conartitis. Finkelbert was quick to shake hands and greet me. It's like I was expected. Knowing his and my career now, that may indeed be true. Beer! My drive as a businessman was and is apparent in meeting me. I told Finkelbert about why I was in Japan, the blind studies, and the UN conference of the Year of the Disabled in Yokohama, 1989. Finkelbert told me he sold Shugu. Hold the fucking front door. I just finished a 10K race fundraiser with Shugu as the main sponsor. Finkelbert and I bonded stronger than any Shugu ever has. Finkelbert, I love you, brother. The first and fondest project I got to pitch Finkelbert was called Bike Finder. After deciding to stay in Japan after my 1-month vacation, I moved into a gaijin house in Musashi Sakai. The party in Tokyo is epic, but finding your bike was an adventure. I drew the design on a napkin at a coffee shop right next to the station. I had to take a break from trying to find my bike and needed a moment. The pen flowed, and a sender and receiver unit was fashioned on the bike and the operation principles outlined. Right across the street from the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo was the Bicycle Cultural Center on the one side and Jetro on the other. I taught English in the morning and evening with an entire day to learn and pitch Tokyo. I sold the Vector, the world's fastest production sports car, on Fuji Television. I sold patio umbrellas to Tokyo Hands and Distribution. I traded Bike Finder for the ride of my life, an internet startup. Really, the sound was mesmerizing, and you hated it all at the same time. The image every time for me was a red gremlin kissing her green cousin. The screeches were the family saying, "No!" and then new thoughts were spawned. It was February 1990, and we all were dressed in winter wear that crowded the booth at the Royal Host restaurant in Harajuku, Tokyo, Japan. The booth fit 5 big gaijins, and the waitress was a giggles. Winchester was a large man with a balding dark hair and spectacles. He spoke fluent Japanese, as an officer in any intelligence army would. He was a mentor geek, and he knew it. Bill Brocato made the introduction to Winchester. Not the last gun in this story. Bill, a Texan from Beaumont, was a writer and a drinker. He fashioned himself as a living beatnik. He was a drunk that you could not resist to party with. Ring, ring. Modemboy, come and get me, slurs Bill. Where are you? I don't know, was Bill's only retort. Still, he brought magic to the world that day as Modemboy was born. Rumor has it, our table is famous, and that sitting in our seats is thought to bring good fortune. Hurry, warm up your butt on our ideas. David Winchester was a showman of the grand Carney style. He put the laptop on the dinner table and turned it on. The green screen lit and all of us giggled. Seeing a laptop in 1990 was a sight to see. The waitress got wet. David typed the word metamorph on the screen. He then droned on and on about how metamorph was single source justification from the U.S. government. This was because it was given the task to find what blew up the space shuttle. Metamorph can search flat-file, non-indexed text with a living thesaurus. It pinpointed ATK and a bad O-ring. Dave hit enter. The waitress again let out a gasp as Metamorph flashed onto the green screen. You know, we all did. David entered the search. Does David like Goliath? Modemboy was not at the table anymore. All sales skills went into play, and Brad Bartz reeled in his future and changed Japan forever. At that table, Jay Smith and Brad Bartz got the rights to sell Metamorph in Japan. This was signed as Trade Balance Incorporated, a business up and running, importing fast cars, art, and wine into Japan between Jay and Brad. The Trade Balance logo was the scales of justice imaged to represent the trade imbalance between the U.S. and Japan. Our mission was, and still is, to fix the trade imbalance. As we did, our logo would change. It was designed to show the balance. Our TBI logo and our closeness to the U.S. Embassy leads to some hijinks later. After a few months, we officially formed Information Access Center Incorporated, with David Winchester as CTO, delivering, Jay Smith as COO, administration, and Brad Bartz as CEO, sales. The three amigos owned the geek scene in Tokyo. A Harvard MBA, a military intelligence officer, and a California salesman had the juice. We also had access to the top, the very top of Japan, and the gaijin corporate world. Modemboy started at 1200 baud. This can be expressed by you reading the next sentence in 2 days from now. Really. At 1200 baud, the text had to catch up to any typist. The green screen had a flicker, and that darn right carrot always said, I dare you. I dare you to hit enter. In 1990, we had a laptop loaded with Metamorph and an electronic copy of the Bible. I became known as a missionary in corporate circles. Does David like Goliath? Was demonstrated all over town. And all over town, eyes would roll, and every prospect said, "Modemboy, what does this have to do with my business?" No matter how hard Modemboy tried, he could not get across that the search engine can search anything. We just have to feed it. We lit the fuse, and the IAC rocket took off. I was a member of the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan in the first week after deciding to live in Japan. Without a doubt, I received the sales Bible from the ACCJ in the form of the ACCJ Directory. The photo book of American executives in Japan is worse than any small-town high school yearbook. Some even used old pictures to look continually young. It was a challenge to sit around and think of ways to really sell Metamorph. It was compounded when Dr. William Bolton did a case study on us for Keio University School of Business. The interview was intense, but the record shows that I had a significant grasp on global business intelligence systems, and search was my playfield. You can read about it in the book japan.co.jp, hard hat required. The challenge was in color for me, even though the computer screen was green. Everyone was counting on me to sell, and pressure was intense. Succeed or go back to teaching English. No fucking way. Dave was pissed. He knew Metamorph was really good and that I was just selling it wrong. The debasing of my efforts were consistent and long. It did not bother me, though. I had the ACCJ directory dog-eared and ready to cold call the next and the next. I am a selling machine. But still, it is hard to get thrown out of executive office after executive office. Dave said, "When you hit on girls, you seem to find their interest and work it." I slept on that. Her. Dave was a big man. Did I mention that? He often slept in the office. Something that bothered me greatly. A policy was derived that said no one can spend the night in my offices ever again. There is something bad about working in a place of sleep. Nonetheless, Jay, Dave, and I knew we had something. We just did not have the captivating reasons for clients to open their checkbooks. That would change quickly once we found the key. The key was elusive, but a betrayal by David unleashed Modemboy, and his fingers took the keyboard and programming of IAC Online went decidedly commercial. Who cares what David did? He stole money. What happened next was epiphany after epiphany to create the next world. That weekend, I took the BBS manual home and built a brand new system 100% under my control. IAC Online was born, and Jay Smith and I took it to the show. Looking back is a technicolor vision that stirs emotions of wow when looking at the events that unfolded. Stakeholders is a word drilled into my Loyola Marymount University Los Angeles education. For Jay and I, the stakeholders in Japan were overt in their manipulation. Okay, so outside influences have directed my actions and results. I'll buy that. You see, Tokyo is the training ground for spies. Spies from all countries use Japan as a playground to train. The gun-free environment and the duplicity of the Japanese make it the test to pass for any agent. Why? The phrase is hone and tatamae, meaning heart and face. The Japanese are masters of presenting the face of tatamae. The reading of the soul is prevented, not by fault of their own. The culture of samurai has many more meanings than long-haired hippies with swords. It was one of rebirth in the continual trials of life. If you looked at an asshole wrong, he would slice your head off in one blow. That is the mystery myth levered by Japanese storytellers. The truth is somewhere between the lines, but the lack of spatial awareness of the Japanese people is spectacular. In modern Japan, it is reflected by the packed subway rides all around Tokyo and Osaka. The ability to compartmentalize is epic. I learned this, but only my hone, heart, was delivered. I had no use for tatamae, no use for bullshit. In 1990, I moved to Koganehara Matsudo, Chiba, to a 2-story house with a garden and koi pond. A home built by a friend's dead father, a home built with love, but so cold. But summer was a party season, and our first epic started with an unfortunate event. Just before the main event, I would shuttle people from Koganehara train station, an hour walk otherwise. I drove a 50,000 yen, $500, white Toyota station wagon. Every car in Japan was white in 1990. Every single one. Everyone wore suits outside, even on weekends. The lapel pin stated which prison they belonged to. And on the subway, I was a foot taller than anyone and could see over a sea of jet black hair from front to back as the snake rode in to Blade Runner City. And I wore cowboy boots. Someone had to leave early, about 2 p.m, so I drove her to the station. On the way back, I got flagged to pull over by a cop stand on the side of the road. I dutifully stopped my car, and unlike today, where I sit motionless with my hands on the wheel, I jumped out and walked to them. They barked and yelled a bit and then made me blow into a breathalyzer. They caught me, as the meter device said 0.0025% was my alcohol content. Turns out, this figure is the exact legal limit. The officers gave me a drink driving ticket, gave me my keys, and let me drive home. You read that right. I got a drunk driving ticket and they let me drive home. Freedom of time being an English teacher was put into full use to understand and then fight this ticket. I knew that if I lost, I would not be able to renew my visa and would have to leave Japan. It was not a matter of the penalty. Any guilty verdict means my kids would not have been born. I went to Kasumigaseki and found my way to the government HQ Diet building. I heard from Jetro that there was a legal library and free assistance available. I found the office and then the clerk. I showed my clerk my drunk driving ticket and asked what was the penalty. The clerk said, the fine is 50,000 yen and you will lose your license for a day. I asked, what if I fight that ticket and lose? Same fine? Yes, said the clerk. I then asked, I am looking for a case that says a mechanical device cannot be considered 100% accurate. The clerk let out an audible and a Cheshire cat grin and said for me to wait. 45 minutes later, the clerk came back with a stack of paper in his hands. He briefly explained that this case said a mechanical device cannot be considered 100% accurate. I had my case. Now I would go see the prosecutor at Matsudo Chiba City Hall with the swagger that I needed. The office was on the 5th floor of a Star Wars bad guy looking building that was City Hall. I rode up with the 2 police officers who gave me the ticket and the court translator. It was a silent ride. I had on a brown suit which was a hand-me-down from my grandfather. I had his father's pocket watch attached and a leather briefcase in my hand. The prosecutor was none too pleased to see me and grunted his instructions. The translator dutifully kept me informed. Prosecutor basically screamed, "You must go to summary judgment and leave." I said no. And this repeated itself for 2 whole hours. Then the prosecutor said, You leave with a grunt huff. 6 weeks go by fast. I arrive on time at Star Wars Center and ride up in the elevator again with the 2 police officers and the translator. The translator looked at me and said, "Mr. Bartz, I've been translating for this court for 20 years. This is the most fun I have ever had." Wow, that really set me back. It was a huge compliment, but it also told me I was in a third world country with concrete. Shit! For 2 hours, the deja vu was intense. The prosecutor went on his rant, and I continued my protest and demand a jury trial. The prosecutor turned red and screamed, "You leave!" in English. 6 weeks later, the letter said I won. Holy guacamole, I won. The rice paper was elegant and touching. I was on cloud 9. I knew enough Japanese to know I was free, but I had to check. I yelled out to Tomoko as I ran down the hallway at our Koganehara home. We were not married yet, but hot and heavy. She looked surprised that I kept saying I won. "I beat the court! I won!" I would scream. I handed her the rice paper and waited for her to read. She took her time and read every word. Then she deadpanned and said, "You did not win. You were pardoned by the new emperor." What? I admired and amused as I looked and laughed out loud. I was pardoned by Emperor Akihito? Thank you, kind sir. Kensington Antique Furniture Warehouse was just outside of Ginza, Tokyo. A cargo space converted to an 18th century ballroom and an authentic working pub serving food from 1066. Modemboy had to eat, so after leaving the glorious world of teaching English, I got a job in sales at Kensington. Every day I would leave the modern world and go back in time. Each item was more valuable to a collector than one could imagine. The amount of money in the inventory could only come from the son of rich. Really rich. Meet Rutaro Takiguchi, a descendant of samurai with long and beautiful hair to back it up. My gaijin co-workers were Timothy and Wayne for the furniture and Jeffrey Zhang at the pub. Bill Brocato, my roommate, was a regular, as this was free whiskey, beer, and food. The expansion of time travel for Modemboy was accented by driving around Tokyo in a beautifully restored old London taxi or a fire engine red convertible Triumph. 24 years old and the party was intense. Takiguchi was a connoisseur, and we were his token gaijin. He showed us off anytime he could. Bar, sushi, and the Blue Note had our names and photos on the walls alongside celebrities of grand. At night, Modemboy would return to Chiba and program the BBS. A new world to come home from the old one. On the way home, it was Blade Runner in between. Lucky? You betcha. Modemboy was grabbing stars and reading history. Heck, I was living history. Kensington sold antiques and Victorian architectural design services. Have you heard of an expense account? Maybe saw on an episode of Mad Men? Nah, nothing compares to the chits carried by Mr. Akimoto of Taisei Construction. Taisei was the world's largest construction company at the time, and Mr. Akimoto was a royalty. His pet project was to build a Victorian village in the hills of Hakone under the base of Mount Fuji. I drank and was funner than Wayne and Timothy, so Takiguchi gave me to Mr. Akimoto. I was traded away like a hooker, an English-speaking token gaijin whore. Did I care? Not one bit. I loved this man, Mr. Akimoto. To become drinking buddies with a mentor is rewarding experience, but not very good for your liver. 3 nights a week for a year, Mr. Akimoto and I would have dinner and go to Ginza hostess clubs. I kept all of them in stitches, so they kept calling me. Every evening ended with getting a $300 taxi coupon to be carried home. Any care to guess why I stayed in Japan in 1989? I could have been an unemployed college graduate in Los Angeles instead. Shit. Thank God for Japan. I was an economic refugee. Okay, these taxi rides home were horrific. I was a stoic drinker until I learned the rules. When I was 18, I asked Richard Riordan, a founder of Mattel Toys, how do you decide to invest in a person? Riordan quipped, I take them out and get them drunk. If they can handle the booze, then they can handle my money. These words haunted me my first years in Japan, including the whole year of self-induced coma drinking with Mr. Akimoto in the Ginza. The taxi home were always incomprehensible. I let down my Richard Riordan rule and became drunk every time. My adrenaline was enough to keep the booze at bay during the singing and carousing. Barf out the window for sure? Check. The taxi ride from the Ginza to Chiba was 2 hours with no traffic. The drivers were so grateful for the business and treated me and Mr. Akimoto like a king every time. At 24 years old, I became a fixture in the party scene. Every day I would wake up in Chiba, say hi to the cherry trees on my balcony, and head to the train station. When I taught English, I had one question I asked every class of students. When you are on your morning commute, how do you pick where you wait in line to get on the train? Typical answers were in planning for the next stop. But one student said, I look for the prettiest girl and wait in that line. He was right. Kensington was run by a rich samurai madman. His long hair was true and not grown for costume. I want to build a replica of the front porch of our Victorian house using real Cotswold stone from England, ordered Takiguchi. I remember saying, that's crazy. The show is in 2 weeks and moving 2 tons of roofing material by air is nuts. Takiguchi flipped his hair back and stood up and said, but Modemboy, we're going to send you. We also need you to buy some antiques in Yorkshire. Oh, of course that's a great idea, stated Modemboy. When do I leave? Tomorrow, said Takiguchi as he left the 18th century ballroom in a huff. Wayne and Timothy were pissed. I got briefed and headed home to pack. Mr. Ono lived in England to buy antiques for Kensington. I wonder if he is related to John and Yoko. But I find out, nope. I had lunch with John Lennon's son after being backstage at filming of Michael Jackson's Moonwalk music video. At 11 years old, Lennon Jr. was articulate, funny, and a vegetarian. His guardian was also a compound gardener. Go figure. London was bright and sunny. The locals were all smiles, and so were our hosts. Takiguchi-san spent a lot of money with these guys on antique furniture, a bunch. So Ono and I are treated to royal treatment. First we dine at the dog racing track with an ex-footballer, soccer player, who was bigger than life and very famous. Bling bling. The dog races were an eye-opener to the use of perceived criminal activity as a show of how connected one was. The first I heard of this was from mentor Terry Matthews. He was a banker in the real world, and on his ship in the Navy, he tells of a bloke that owed him money that happened to fall overboard missing. The rumor came that Terry took care of him because of his bad debt. Which was not true. Terry gloated that his debt receipts grew and no one left a tab anymore. He basically explained the story as he let the rumor hang because it was to his advantage. The dog races were new to me, quite exciting to tell you the truth. The nature of the characters present in our group and in the stands are a picture in my head, an actual photograph that I can frame. The soccer god said, "Bet here and there, but save XX for dog in the 7th race. He will win for sure." Kid to Earth, "Houston, we have admiration." Yes, it happened, and Superdog won the race when we all got paychecks. Soccer said again, "We still have to play and lose a little to seem legit," playing his sneaky scheme to get worshipped. I reflect to Terry, but skip and enjoy the play. We then jump to a casino of red velvet, and I proceed to have a blast and give back to the house.
What do I know? I think it's wrong when you come, then you fucking leave. What do I know? I know I'm dumb, but at least I can fucking breathe. What do I know? You think it's wrong when I come, then I fucking leave. What do I know? She tell me when I get it right. Honey, wait up. I don't really even give a fuck. Honey, wait up. She come when I get it right. Honey, wait up. I don't really even give a fuck. She tell me when I get it right. Honey, wait up. I don't really even give a fuck. Honey, wait up. She come when I get it right. Honey, wait up. I don't really even give a fuck. Why? What do I know? 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 What do I know?
自由に楽しくアドレスで変身プリンセス横綱 J メールなら100のドメインの中から好きなアドレス無料で好きなだけ i モードからのアクセスも OK！jmail.co.jp
All a blur and a vivid memory all at the same time. I loved London and she loved me. Walking around, I was among cousins. Then, one of the business partners pulled me aside and said, "The other guy is ripping off Mr. Takiguchi." Boring. An evening of wonderment and new was torched. Now I had to explain to Mr. Ono what was said and gauge if he was a stooge or part of the thievery. Duped seems correct. The rest of the trip in England was not messed up, but my guard was up and I took account of everything. The visit to Cotswold Stone Quarry was nifty. The town was overgrown with ivy, but the bricks still stand out. A quick tea and purchase of a couple of tons of slate. The clerk was priceless when she said, "Tokyo by air?" Here's your sign. Okay. The Russian car was funny, and Ono kept talking to her. I got to drive and had fun on the M5. Stonehenge was a welcome relief from the talk of antiques. This time, the historical monument was talking to Modemboy. A brief moment, I thought Stonehenge was a modem to the stars. The samurai of Takiguchi brought me back to some reality, but I've always held a piece of Stonehenge in my heart. The drive north turned green and greener. The rock walls and sheep were stunning against the blue skies. In Yorkshire, we visit with Kensington's biggest antique supplier and stay at his home. The evening was a fiddle, hooping and a hollering with hands full of beer. The fuzzy morning was woken when I gazed on the 20-foot tall stained glass windows that Takiguchi bought. A church from the early 1980s was being dismantled so a convenience store could be built. History grabbed me harder this time. I did not feel good participating in taking these artifacts out of England. The golden rule was in play, so my thoughts mean nothing. The pews had been sat in for hundreds of years. The wear was more defined by the emotions left behind. After the purchase tour and us as kings, we end our tour in Bath, England. This Roman spa town is spectacular. The warm waters had the nifty, natural smell without modern chemicals. I felt cleansed of this business of old. Stonehenge and a palm reader in hippie London set my transformation from mere human into Modemboy. The fake news of the reading was quite funny in that it said I was allergic to tomatoes. My last evening in London, I shared that with the footballer, who immediately bust out laughing. He explained that in Britain, pewter mugs created a toxic brew with tomato juice. For 400 years, England stopped eating tomatoes. No wonder the food is, whatever. I returned to Japan to find my job was gone. That's okay. Next chapters for me meant new mentors. So, let me clean up some things first. In parallel to working at Kensington, Jay Smith and I worked starting our business. The wing of relationships took flight and our efforts became more focused. Still, had to work to eat. I got a job as the right-hand man for a military hardware sales representation company and an author of How to Learn English books. His theme was to learn to speak Japanese with English syntax first. Interesting man and approach. At 24, he brought me to Taipei, Taiwan, to negotiate with the president of Black & Decker for arms sales in Japan. I was there as a token to throw off the room. My boss explained his position and asked me to chirp in, which I did. Then Black & Decker presidents asked, why is he here? Good point. The deal was done, and we died.
I just hit him and it might just send him in a crisis. Send him in a life elemental type shit. Just send him in a life shit. Enter in the right shit. Enter in his eyes go dark. Bite this venom like he bite this. Spit him as he like this. Like but he likes right better in this fight. Live in him with the fight still. In him in the light still on. But his eyes go dark. Mommy I got Bitch let go my cock. Let me go raw. Never push in my socks. Fucking wake up. Thinking like shouldn't I stop? Bitch I go hard. Bitch I need fucking a lot. I just hit him and it might just send him in a crisis. Send him in no life and I'm in no type shit. Just send him in no hype shit. And I'm in the white shit. And I'm in his eyes go dark. Like this venom like he bite this. But I'm shit like this. Like but he likes white better in this fight. Live in him with the fight still. And I'm in the light still on. But his eyes go dark. Mommy I got Bitch let go my cock. Let me go raw. Never push shit in my socks. Fucking me God. Thinking like shouldn't I stop? Bitch I go hard. Bitch I need fucking a lot. Mommy I got Bitch let go my cock. Let me go raw. Never push shit in my socks. Fucking me God. Thinking like shouldn't I stop? Bitch I go hard. Bitch I need fucking a lot.